What's the worst date you ever had?
I had a date send her drink back several times and eventually had our server bring out all of the ingredients in separate glasses so that she could mix it herself, the right way. What's worse is we were both in the service industry at the time.
In college, I hit it off with a girl and agreed to go on a first date to a school hockey game. When I met her there, I realized I had forgotten my wallet, so I had to borrow $5 from her to pay for my ticket. Not a great start, and I could tell I had dug myself an early hole. Then, once we sat down, we realized that neither of us liked hockey at all. I have no idea why we agreed to meet there, but we were both totally uninterested in the game. So we started talking about other things we were into, and I mentioned that I liked board games. She said, "You sound like my grandma." At that point it was clear that neither of us were into this at all, but it was the first period of a hockey game that she had paid $10 whole for, and neither of us felt right leaving. We sat there and stonily watched the rest of the game. Afterwards, we said, "Let's hang out sometime," and then never messaged each other again. Then, a few semesters later, my friend called me up all excited about a new girl he was dating. He wanted me to come to a get-together at his apartment and meet her. I walk in, and of course he's sitting on the couch with his arm around the very same hockey-hating girl. I immediately grabbed my wallet, handed her $5, and said, "Thank God. I've been looking for you for 2 years." She laughed, and things went all right after that.
That's a good way to handle that.
It was with an undertaker's assistant. He'd circle every topic of conversation back to corpses. Me. "So, do you know what you're gonna order?" Him. "Well, I was thinking the steak, but I had eaten steak when we got the river guy in, and now it makes me feel queasy." I ended up leaving after half an hour.
I'm so sorry. Sounds like a horrible date, but from an outside perspective that's hilarious.
It's absolutely hilarious now. Whenever I go on a date, my friends always ask, on a scale of corpses to 10, how did it go?
He was over an hour late, no text or call, and when he finally showed up, his excuse was, "Sorry I'm late, my mum had to take a poo."
This just became my default excuse every time I'm late to anything ever for the rest of my life.
Met her at a bar. She ordered food but didn't eat it since it looked disgusting. It looked fine. So we left to go to a different restaurant, and on the walk there, she kept ducking and glancing at the sky like she was being attacked by bats. She hardly said anything over then whole date. It was like pulling teeth to get her to talk about herself. At the second restaurant she took forever ordering and again didn't eat because the food looked disgusting. Emailing about the date afterwards, she admitted that she was high on ice, which I guess is some kind of meth.
What do you expect, man? She was in effing bat country.
Met a guy at a concert who asked me out to dinner the next weekend. Said we'd go to a restaurant halfway between his place and mine. Gives me the address, which I printed out on MapQuest BC. This was before GPS was normal on phones or in cars. I get there and it's an apartment building. Call him to say I think he gave me the wrong address, and he said, "Nope. You're driving." Takes me to an Applebee's because they have the cheapest happy hour, he said. We have one drink and he eats potato wedges by himself. When I drove him back, he asked me where my overnight bag was. I said I'm not staying the night and thanks for the beverage. He took my keys out of my ignition and told me to go upstairs. I told him if he doesn't give me my keys back, I will start screaming and call the cops. He threw them in the front seat as he got out, telling me I'm missing out on hot tub time. I thankfully never saw him again.
Sort of same happened to me. Met a guy in OKC when I was in between HS and college. We got chatting and agreed to meet for a date. Since we were both young and broke, he suggested a park in his area. Said he'd bring drinks if I being food. Sure. Packed some snacks and a blanket thinking picnic. Got to the address he gave me and it was his apartment complex. The park, more like a grassy area for dogs, was a part of the complex. I had pretty low self-esteem from a recent breakup, so I just said, "What the hell, let's see where this goes." He met me at my car and we walked around for like 10s when he mentions he left the beer up in his apartment. Once in his apt, he immediately tries to shove his tongue down my throat. I made some excuse and luckily was able to leave. Still think about that sometimes and shiver.
So I don't have many, because I'd only been swiping for a few months before I met someone, but maybe I'm also naive enough to have some funny things happy already. Like the time I thought the bot I was chatting with was just someone who was super distracted. Anyway, matched with a cute girl, she likes to climb, we have good chat, great. Let's go and do some top rope and hang out. But she doesn't have a car, so I need to pick her up, 30 minutes off route. I'm not thrilled, but whatever. Meet her and, well, it's not her. Or it is her from the profile, but maybe from 5 to 8 years and a kid ago? I'm tempted to call it off, but I'm too much of a softie, and she says she made cookies. I love cookies. We head off to the small local cliff. We arrive, walk the 10-minute approach, the conversation is still fine, but I'm wary now. I resolve to just have a nice time and have some fun, and just learn from the experience. She's perfectly nice, but I'm seeing red flags. At the crag, she says she borrowed her friend's shoes and isn't sure they'll fit. Same with the harness. Oh, well, they do fit, yay. So I rig the anchor and we start climbing on a nice 5.6, easy, for a warm-up. Except that she can't climb. Fine, okay, whatever. We're still chatting as she works on the off-ground move, and then just bursts into tears. Turns out that it's her sister's dating profile and that's who she borrowed the stuff from, and that her husband doesn't know she's on dating apps. I find all of this out amid tears, and so does everyone else there who can overheat it. Some very awkward talk therapy later, I drop her back at her house. Is it her house? Is it her neighbor's house so that hubby doesn't see? And she leaves me the cookies as an apology. And they were store-bought.
Greater than, and they were store-bought. The real kicker is in the end.
I went to a New Year's Eve party with a guy the first had been chatting with for months. When we get there, his friends asks him where his girlfriend is, and they were not referring to me. I went out for a smoke at that point and he went after, saying she was boring and he was gonna break up with her. I didn't hang out with him for the rest of the night. I guess I should thank him because I hooked up with the party host instead, and we've been together for 7 years.
This totally reminds me of a story I was told once. Woman, let's call her M, is headed to her brother's anniversary party and brings along a guy she had been casually seeing for a while. Guy proceeds to be super inappropriate, obnoxious sex comments and jokes **** in front of her family ****, getting super touchy, again, in front of her family, and gets super drunk and starts hitting on her sister. The family tells him to get lost and M is super choked as loser guy drove her there, so her Sil arranged for her, Sil's brother D, to drive M home. Well, they really clicked on the drive and went out a few days later. They just celebrated their 40th anniversary this year. And that is the story of how my parents met. LMFAO.
A guy approached me at a coffee shop and we ended up hitting it off and talking all night. About a week later we had our first real date at my place so I could cook him dinner. I lived in a small one-bedroom apartment at the time and the bathroom door was right next to the kitchen. He excused himself before dinner and proceeded to take the loudest, and what I presume to be, the most massive poo this universe has ever seen. The sounds of the toilet carnage still echo in my nightmares. I of course didn't mention that I heard the whole event and we went about our evening. After dinner we got into my bed so we could watch a movie. 30 minutes into it, I needed to use the restroom, so I got out of the bed to reveal that I had unknowingly started my period and left a noticeable pool of blood where I was sitting. He helped me change the sheets. Anyway, we've been married a year now and he still takes the nastiest dumps known to mankind. Edit. Wow, thank you for the awards and sweet comments.
The turns this story took put a smile on my face and warmed my heart. Thank you for sharing.
I told my date before we went out that I was divorced, just as a heads up. She pried for more information and I tell her my wife had an affair. She starts joking about it, then asks to see a picture of my ex and the guy she left me for. Then she called her affair partner cute. Oh, and she spent the other part of the date calling me fat. Edit. Thanks for all the upvotes and kind words. The F-ed up thing is that I think she actually really liked me. I was almost in tears at the table. I wanted to bounce, but I didn't want to skip out on the check. I'm not sure if she could pay for it. She even kissed me after and I was so pathetic at the time I kissed back. She went home and I had a chance to digest the whole ordeal and felt sick to my stomach. I got home and blocked her number. She texted me a few days later on a different number saying she knows I blocked her number, she's sorry she brought up my divorce and that she really liked me. The whole thing made me pretty depressed and I feel like my self-esteem is finally starting to rebound from it. Also, I'm not even fat and yes I go to the gym, assholes. I'm pretty normal weight for a dude in his 30s. That was probably a cultural thing since she was from a different country. I find certain cultures shame any sort of fat.
As a relatively recent, mature, widower, new and inexperienced to the dating scene after 31 years of marriage, I had a dinner date with a much younger woman who, as it turned out, was extremely aggressive, unheard of in my prime. Ending our first date, I was dropping her off and had intended only to give her a thank you peck on the cheek. However, our goodbye moment morphed into a high school-like make-out session during which she started, shockingly, to grope me. My two-seater car was dark and cramped and I was wearing a suit and winter overcoat, but I nevertheless was extremely surprised to feel her hand navigating south of my belt. Suddenly she squeezed hard and, with sheer delight and fire in her dimly lit eyes, delightedly exclaimed that I had an enormous penis. In fact, she was squeezing a single large roll of my lower belly fat. For the first and last time in my life, I glanced at my pretend wristwatch and told her that I had to leave due to the late hour and an early morning meeting. I couldn't imagine her reaction and disappointment had our date developed any further, as I am, at best, average. I bailed and we never spoke again.
Went to get drinks with a girl. Talk for about 20 minutes when she says, "I have a boyfriend, but I'd still like to have sex with you. My boyfriend only lets me have sex with black guys though, so we'd have to film it and you'd have to edit it to make yourself black." I had to tell her I'm not that great of an editor. Also WTF.
I love how your first reaction was that you're not that great of an editor. LMFAO.
She started talking about her life story from childhood to that day. Year by year, with every single traumatic story and emotions. That was our first ever date and she didn't even let me speak for that duration. I was like, oh okay, she is now talking about high school, 6 more years left, hold tight.
I was born at a young age.
I posted this story about a year ago in a thread asking for stories about becoming instantly uninterested in someone you asked on a date. I'm sure there are worse stories out there, but this was a bit of a shocker to me at the time and stands out as the most awkward first date of my life. I was set up by a friend's girlfriend, shown a picture and said sure. She was good looking and I liked the girl's other friends that I had met. She couldn't be too bad, right? I call her and set up the day and time for pickup at her house. We were both still living with our parents. I arrived to pick her up and there she is with her parents and brother sitting around the kitchen table just talking. I get a bad vibe from everyone but her when she introduces me. On the way to dinner I mention the tension I felt from them all. She says it's because she just broke up with her boyfriend a few weeks before, her family loved him and they were all upset with her dating someone else. Okay, I can see that, maybe they'll get over it and like me once they get to know me if we date for a while. Later on I ask about her brother. No brothers. Okay, cousin? No boy cousins that she is close to. What about the guy with her parents when I picked her up? That was her ex. There to have dinner with her parents. They have had him over several times a week since the breakup, trying to get them back together, and had made sure he was there when I arrived. Sounded like a terrible situation to get involved in no matter how good looking I thought she was. Dropped her off early, told her to call me if they ever stopped doing that, and never ended up speaking to her again.
Oh boy, finally my time to shine. I talked to a girl on Tinder 8 years ago. She got drunk and told me to come over because her and friends were playing strip poker. I was on overnight duty, so sadly I could not partake. 30 minutes later I receive a picture on my phone that I couldn't even make out. I handed my phone to my roommate and asked if he could figure it out. He says, "Dude, that's a butthole." It surely was. She had taken a picture of her butthole from at measly 0.5 inches away and it was so close up I could barely tell what it was. I thought to myself, if this is how she leads, the rest has to be great. Spoiler alert, was wrong. She tells me we should finally meet next weekend. At Applebee's. I meet her there and she looks beat. Like she had just run 5 triathlons and been awake for a week straight. Not 3 minutes into meeting and sitting down she says she has to use the restroom. She doesn't come back for 30 minutes plus. The waiter comes up and says he has seen her here multiple times and she has been known to shoot up heroin in the bathroom and pass out. I'm very not into this at this point, but for her own safety I ask if a waitress could peek in the bathroom and see if she is okay. She was not. She ordered and died. So that was a thing. TLDR, my Tinder date showed me her butthole, then ordered and died at Applebee's.
That's the worst one I've read.
Thanks. Clovis, New Mexico is rough. Glad I'm not stationed there anymore.
I've posted my worst on this question before, so I'll post a runner-up now. Dating at an older age is pretty difficult to begin with. This was when I was about 47, and an acquaintance I hadn't known long said she had the perfect guy for me. He had seen me at a sports event with my acquaintance, and I agreed to meet him for coffee after asking a few questions about what he did, karate instructor and sports coach, and finding out he was about my age. Showed up on the date, and he had very red eyes. He told me right away he was very stoned. This was before we were a legal state. I'm not anti-WD by any means, but showing up stoned was the first red flag. He informed me he hadn't worked in several years, and his coaching days were 10 years in the past. He had been attempting, in his 40s, to become a pro dirt bike rider, living with friends while he was pursuing his dream, and blaming the industry for his lack of success. I started asking gentle questions just to get the full scope of the train wreck that was before me. He asked if I wanted to go dirt bike riding with him, and I politely declined. The bill came for our coffee and pastries, and he sheepishly said he couldn't afford it but would pay me back on our next date, and mentioned he was a good friend of the guy my acquaintance was dating. I asked who the guy was, and immediately recognized the name. The guy had been in the news as he just got out of prison for involuntary manslaughter. I offered to treat with no obligation and gently shut down the idea of another date. I was going to ask my acquaintance, what the actual F were you thinking? But learning who she was dating was a complete answer in itself.
We'd still love to hear about your first worst one. We're on Reddit, we have nothing better to do.
Literally poo myself on a date once. Wasn't technically a date, but the guy had a farm. He took me to see the animals, feed, etc. I walked away for a few minutes and overtrusted a fart. I just looked at him and asked if he could please take me back to my car. He wanted to know why and I said because I pooped in my pants. Guy had a super nice truck and made me sit on my feet all the way back to my vehicle. We actually ended up dating for 2-ish years, and somehow me pooting myself on the first date was the end of all jokes.
How unbelievably attractive are you that you managed to poo yourself on the first date and still go out for years after?
Had a girl openly flirt with the bartender in front of me. She says she wasn't, but handing him her own phone and asking for his contact info in front of her date seems like it to me.
Similar experience here. Was out getting drinks, dinner with a girl I had been kinda seeing for a minute, and she invites this attractive tall guy to come sit with us and starts flirting with him. We weren't official or anything, but it was still weird and definitely made me feel pretty insecure. IDK, why people do poo like this.
Met her for dinner. We seemed to hit it off well in the first few minutes, until I started feeling the worst pain ever in my side. Turns out I had a kidney stone. I unfortunately had to nope out of that one very quickly. She had blocked me via text when I abruptly left dinner, so she never got the message that I ended up in the hospital. I didn't see her for years until we ran into each other at a bar, me with a different girlfriend, her with her husband. I explained what had happened. She felt pretty bad, but hey, no long-lasting harm done. I bought her and her husband a drink, chatted for a few, and left them to finish their evening together.
Well, it sounds like at least it was an ending you could laugh about years later. Not necessarily a date, but a person I was dating invited me to his parents' house for the afternoon. He wanted to introduce me to them and show me the house he grew up in. I thought it was super sweet and had no problems going. He was also in the middle of moving and needed to pick up a few things, so it really didn't seem that unusual. Yeah, we got there and it was awful. His entire family was there. They traveled from hours away too. This was not just meeting the parents, it was meeting the entire family. Even worse, at some point, this jackass told his parents that he had proposed. We had been dating 2 months. I spent the entire afternoon dumbfounded and just playing along. We were 2 hours from home and I had no cell service, no way to leave at all. We ended up spending the afternoon brainstorming wedding ideas and planning an Alaskan honeymoon that his parents planned to gift us. His brother even called to say congratulations. We drove back to his apartment in silence. When we got there, I got in my car and left, didn't even bother grabbing my stuff. Weirdest experience ever. I have no idea how he broke it to his parents that we weren't getting married.
A bit of a sidebar, but people with big families need to understand it is very stressful to meet everyone at once.
Got set up on a blind date once between mutual friends. She shows up to the restaurant already a little tipsy, orders multiple appetizers and only takes like 1 or 2 bites from each one. Then she proceeds to order 3 or 4 more drinks and is visibly drunk at this point. She gets up and says she's going to the bathroom and staggers off. About 15 to 20 minutes go by, so I try to call her several times but no answer. Finally I decide to pay the check and just leave. About 2 hours later I'm sitting at home and I get a call from an unknown number. It's the police department. She was picked up on a DUI on her way home after she ditched me and gave the cops my number to see if I could go bail her out.
That is a bold move. How hard did you laugh at that?
I was blown away. I just said I don't know anybody by that name.
Was told we were going to dinner and then shopping. I drove to the town, 1 hour each way, 'cause he didn't have a license. He directed me, didn't know my way around at all, to Burger King. Okay, I'll work with it. Standing in line, a worker accidentally leans on a packet of ranch. It breaks open and shoots at me, right on the front of my nicest shirt. Profound apologizing commences. I ended up paying for dinner too. Then we went to Walmart, where his mom worked, so he could get a discount. Didn't buy anything. Drive home, he starts apologizing out of nowhere. I thought it was because of the bad date. Until the smell hits me. He passed gas and I had to legit pull over and roll the windows down a while. Edit. To address a few frequent questions, no more official dates with him, but we did continue to see each other several months. This was high school, and I was older than him.
Goddamn, the man hotboxed you.
Went to brewery. Date said I had hairy arms and that meant I was horny. Said, "You look really awful in this light," and then tried to dig out of that hole by saying in his native language that was a term of endearment long-term couples said to each other. 0/10 did not date again.
Greater than I had hairy arms and that meant I was horny. What?
We went to dinner and he started chatting up the waitress. Like interrupting me every time the waitress came over and talking to her for a few minutes instead. After a couple times I just pulled my phone out and started scrolling through Reddit and he complained when he noticed I was on my phone. Cue a lecture about my generation. He was like 6 years older than me, IIRC. Then he got mad when I wouldn't suck his DK in the parking lot. I ended up going back inside the restaurant and calling a friend to pick me up. Dude's car was still sitting there when I left. F you, Jason.
Wow, what a DK bag.
I, 35F, met a guy, 41, on Bumble, had dinner plans to go to a wing joint. I asked if we were still on a few hours prior. He says, "Yep, just gonna shower and jerk off." I joked and said something like, "Whoa there Mr. Perv, TMI." Which apparently offended him greatly, as he blew me off for our date. When I asked WTF after the fact, he said he thought I was mad, so he spent the evening anger cleaning, and told me, "Don't ever call me a perv again," but asked if I'd want to meet the next day. Why I said yes, is anyone's guess. ... We meet at Tim Hortons for coffee. He starts by joking that my soon-to-be ex-husband is going to show up to beat him up. He says this repeatedly, even after I explain the ex is out with his girlfriend, and continues to eyeball the windows nervously. Then, after sitting down with our coffee, he asks if I want to go to his car to get some gum. No, thank you. A few minutes later, he asks again. And then again a few minutes later. Dude, if you want some gum, go get it. I'll be right here. He harumphs, does not get the gum, and we continue talking, where the conversation devolves into him ranting about how Hollywood is shoving biracial couples down his throat. I ask if he has any big plans for the evening. He states he's going to go home and jerk off. At least he has a hobby. We walk to the parking lot after the fact, and he asks if he can kiss me. Now, I had just got out of a 14-year, affection-starved relationship, and hadn't kissed anyone but my ex in that time. So, stupid me, said yes. He kisses me, then grabs my arm in a death grip, and drags me to his car as I struggle to get away. Thankfully, his dumbass hadn't cleared the seat of before his abduction attempt, so as he's trying to manage holding onto me while clearing off his seat, I managed to wrench my arm free, run to my car, and get the hell out of there.
Showed up to a Tinder date where we agreed but she wasn't there. Texted and she said they were around the corner. Come to find her, mid-20s divorced socialite. and her friend, mid-40s salesman, had been drinking all day and were proper poo-faced. Proceeded to join them at the table, where she proceeded to talk about the married guy at the next table and kept walking by and dropping things so she could bend over in front of him. Then some racist talk and some cocaine use, them not me. And then they decided, mercifully, to ditch me because I was no fun.
Hell of a first impression.
I went over to a boy's apartment I had hung out with a few times already to watch a movie. In the middle of the movie he stuck his finger in my belly button. We weren't even cuddling, just randomly turns towards me and puts his finger in my belly button. I said to him, "Get your finger out of my bully button?" To which he responded by making a weird noise similar to an adult using baby talk and saying cuckoo to a baby and wiggled his finger still inside my belly button. I left immediately, never talked to him again, and my friends still refer to the situation as belly button boy.
Probably not as bad as some of the others on here, but still makes me cringe 10 plus years later. I was 21 and met a guy at my summer job who was 20. He was a super sweet guy and we got along great when we worked the same shifts together. Eventually he asked me out on a date Saturday night, and I said sure. He said we would go out to dinner, hang out around town, etc. I was really excited because he seemed like a great guy and I never went on many dates. I pull up to his house and he comes out with like 3 other guys. They all jump in my car and I'm like, oh, hello. And they say they want to have a party that night and started directing me around to all the local liquor stores so I could buy alcohol for them. I was a shy, self-conscious girl with low self-esteem and I was always a people pleaser who didn't stand up for myself, so I obliged. I drove these little assholes around town, picking up alcohol for them while they sat in the car, feeling like a complete and utter idiot the whole time. When we got back to my friend's house, and I parked and started taking off my seatbelt, they started laughing at me, like, "Who said you were invited?" I was totally non-confrontational, so I just said, "Okay, see you later." They hopped out of my car, took the alcohol with them, and I drove home, totally burning in embarrassment. I had a shift with the guy a few days later and he never even acknowledged it. Neither did I, but our vibe obviously changed dramatically. I never saw him again after that summer. Edit. Thank you all for your kind words and concern. This was a long time ago, and I have grown a lot since then. I'm in a much better place mentally with a lot more confidence, with a wonderful husband, beautiful son, and another little one on the way. Those guys were poo, but we all learn and grow from our mistakes, and it contributed to an eventual realization that I deserve to be treated much, much better. Smiley face. Edit 2. To answer some FAQs. 1. Why didn't I call the cops on him to ruin their party? I don't know. Didn't think of it at the time. I was not a very vindictive person. As I mentioned, passive people pleaser. 2. Why did we go to multiple liquor stores? IRC they were hunting down a specific type of alcohol. I am dating myself a bit here, but I feel like it was when 4 Loko was re-released after being banned in most of the states. Also, the various suburbs around here had different liquor laws at the time. 3. Did I pay for the alcohol? IRC, partially. They gave me a little cash but not enough to cover the purchases, so I covered the difference. Stupid. I know. But I thought I would at least get to enjoy some of it later.
That's just absolutely bizarre levels of cruel. There's gotta be an easier way to get alcohol as a 20-year-old than asking a girl out on a fake date so you can trick her into supplying you for a party.
It was a double date. She was more interested talking to the other girl throughout the whole thing. Found out later from the other guy that his girl cheated on him with my date.
Wow, that was a twist ending I didn't see coming.
Happens to me quite often back in college, actually. A lot of girls I tried to date back then always found themselves to be gay for some reason.
Went on a date with this guy who asked me out to get breakfast first. Well, he decided Tim Hortons was a suitable place to go. First of all, he drove like an idiot. He was on his phone the whole time and would speed regularly, and I think he even drove through a red light. All this to not even go because he didn't want to pay for $3 parking, so we went back to his house. He was living with 3 other roommates, all girls, and his room was in the basement. That's fine, I didn't really care. Anyways, he was bragging all morning about how he cleaned his room just for me, but when I got there, it was hardly clean and he had set out 3 Playboy magazines on his dresser for display. Despite being uncomfortable, I thought, well, it's already been this long, better finish the date. Bad idea. He puts on a Western-style TV show, not really my thing, and cuddles up next to me. He didn't smell the best and he kept rubbing my arm in some kind of affectionate way. He also kept asking me heavy questions and stuff about my ex. Anyways, we finish an episode, they're like an hour, and I'm determined to get out of his place as quick as possible. But before I go, he stops me and asks me out to dinner for another date. I refuse, obviously, as I wasn't having a good time, and his last trying words were, "Damn, I was even gonna pay." Probably not the worst on this thread, but it made me really uncomfortable at the time.
All these posts and I realize that the awkward dates I have had might not be so bad.
Reposting my first Reddit comment from 11 years ago, I wasn't feeling great, but decided to meet anyway. We met at a Belgian beer bar. She was gorgeous, fun, and totally into me. I felt a gas pain, so I leaned forward slightly to quietly relieve the pressure. I completely and explosively shat myself. The odor was immediate. I excused myself to the bathroom, but the damage was too great. I walked out of the bathroom, muddy panted, out of the bar, and boarded the train for home. The date was nothing, compared to the horror of the following 3 weeks, recovering from E. coli.
How did she take it? Came out from a movie, late at night, and date's Camaro was stolen. Apparently, he called his wife, that I did not know he had, and let her know where he was and what happened. She showed up and realized he was on a date. She started chasing me around the parking lot telling me she was going to kill me. Saved by the cops who showed up just in time to take the auto theft report.
Never understood that. Why do people get mad at the person who isn't there so when their so is the one stepping out on them?
We met at a trailhead to take a walk. He started farting right away. Then he opened his backpack and got an apple. He proceeded to eat the apple. Didn't offer me an apple. Just ate his apple and farted.
Was he a horse?
He was tall and had long hair. He ate the entire apple in a few bites. He also ran ahead of me a few times.
She sat down and went on about how great her career was, how she was a year younger than me but already middle management, then after 30 minutes just said, "Can I go home now?" got up, and left me with the drinks bill. Saddest was when I met a date at the bus stop outside the cinema. She was looking around worried until I said hello. She almost had tears in her eyes and replied, "I didn't think you'd want to show up after seeing me." She was a cute but curvier lass in early 20s and apparently had been stood up twice before. She wasn't the most mature, but was really fun, and lovely. Had I not met that now wife, I'd have seen her again. I hope she found happiness.
Man, that stirred some feelings in me. Sad but happy. I hope she found happiness too.
I was brought up in Poland by Polish parents, university professors, went to a Polish school, Polish university, etc. Then I had a date with an American man whose grandmother was Polish. He grilled me on the language and criticized my pronunciation and corrected my grammar. This from a guy whose Polish vocabulary was maybe 100 words. He told me I speak like a peasant.
I, too, am Polish, live in America. Said something in Polish in a class once. A Russian classmate told me, completely seriously, that my pronunciation was horrible. Yeah, I know. That's because I'm not speaking Russian.
Well, I gave this answer on a different topic, but it ties in with this. We were out on a date, we had been seeing each other for a while, close to a year maybe. She gets a phone call. Suddenly she looks destroyed. Her fiancé had just died in a motorcycle accident.
How do you even react in that situation?
On one date I showed up at her parents' house to pick her up, thinking we were going for drinks in the neighborhood. She opens up the door wearing sweatpants, trainers and a hoodie as if she just got back from football practice. I was pretty well dressed, so she decided to change into something else. She says I can just wait in the living room with her parents. Not that bad, we have some small talk and I expect to be leaving soon anyways. She then shows up wearing the next less than casual outfit and sits down in the living room as well. Saying nothing, she just gets on her phone. She's doing nothing but texting whilst I'm left talking with her parents, didn't expect a date with them. At this point I don't know what to expect anymore. Luckily I was able to convince her to go out after a bit and we end up having drinks. All in all, she wasn't my type, definitely after that date.
If you didn't mention drinks, I'd assume you were both 17-person facepalming.
Only a couple years off with that guess, it was quite a long time ago. Edit. I think I was 19 and she was 18.
Girl I met online claimed to be 24, turned out to be 16. Fortunately I figured it out before anything crazy happened, but man, talk about dodging a bullet.
This was my greatest fear back before I met my wife. I lived in a college town, but somehow teenagers would get in the dating pool.
Met a girl at a country bar one night in my 20s. We were both pretty drunk but hit it off pretty good. Ended up getting her number and we agreed we'd go on a real date. Fast forward to the date, she gets in my vehicle and she looks almost identical to my mom. I was mortified. I was polite and we went for lunch where I found out she also had a boyfriend. She wasn't sure if she was into. Never talked to her again.
Is this like a poor man's Back to the Future? I had a date with a guy who spent the entire date whining about how much this or that sucked. Everything sucked. The food, the waitstaff, the movie, the fact that I took my own garbage to the garbage can after the movie, and most of all, the night shift computer people he saw who hung around the outside of their office, smoking. He complained about their high salaries. I pointed out that I was one of those computer people. No, I didn't mention how much I made, and that was the last date I ever went on with him. I never talked to him again.
I've never had a legendarily bad date, but I've had a few very bad ones. Worst one was a dude I met on OKC. He'd seemed nice enough online, looked decent. We made plans to meet at a board games cafe, since he spoke pretty enthusiastically about loving board games and playing a lot of them. In no particular order, the problems were: asterisk, he showed up approximately 20 minutes late. Asterisk, he was significantly more overweight than he was in his photos. I assumed they were old pictures. Asterisk, he was wearing a stained white t-shirt and cargo shorts, was visibly sweaty. It was February, and cold, and smelled awful. Asterisk, he hadn't told me that he clearly had some sort of mobility disability. I didn't ask, but I assumed cerebral palsy or something similar. He walked with 2 crutches. This wouldn't have been an issue, but I felt very weird about the fact that he didn't tell me ahead of time, because asterisk, the first thing out of his mouth was how the cafe was in such a pooty place with no disabled parking and he'd had to walk a significant distance. Dude, if I'd known, I'd have suggested somewhere more accessible. Asterisk, he refused to order anything from the cafe, and instead drank only from the large bottle of water he'd brought in his bag. I had already covered his entry fee. Perhaps he really couldn't afford a 2-pound pint of Coke, but it came across as weird and rude. Asterisk, he didn't show any interest in any asterisk of the board games. My plan had been for him to pick a game he liked, and for me to pick a game I liked, and to play one after the other while we talked. After I clocked how difficult he found it to move around, I offered to go pick up whatever game his pick was. You could browse the shelves pretty effectively from a seated position. He had no ideas. Zero. Hadn't heard of any of the games. I finally brought over one of the games we'd talked about on OKC, Odin's Ravens, and he acted like he'd never seen it before, giving me the distinct impression he'd lied about liking games, or at least that one, for an unknown reason. Asterisk, conversation was just generally very stilted. I kept bringing up topics. So, what do you do? Who do you live with? Are you a town native? What are your hobbies? What are you doing for the rest of this weekend? Have you ever played game? And getting just nothing. Single word or short sentence answers. He didn't ask me a single thing. I don't know if he was just nervous, or autistic, or just decided early on that he didn't like me or what. But it was awkward as hell. I stayed the minimum I could to be polite, just over an hour. I sort of assumed he just wasn't having a good time, so I was utterly baffled when he then asterisk tried to hug me goodbye, not until you shower PLS, and tried to set up a second date. I gave him a vague response about staying in touch, then gave him the slow fade. I'm still baffled. Maybe fate was just conspiring against him that day and he wanted another shot? I have no idea. Asterisk edit asterisk. A huge number of responses are people just saying that a board game cafe sounds so cool or it's something they've never heard of. So apparently board game cafes aren't popular in America. Here's the site for one of my local ones for anyone who wants to know more. Open one in your town. Link.
I like the idea of playing a couple board games you each like. Great way to have a conversation, and if it dies down for a few you're still interacting by playing a game together. Sucks it went down that way, but sounds like it was for the better. Asterisk boards to board games. Damn autocorrect. Set up an internet date. Arrived at the coffee shop and realized the pics were from a long time ago or really misleading. It was annoying, but I'm no 10 out of 10. We chatted over a coffee, then opted to get lunch next door. I wasn't getting much of a vibe, but I was hungry. As we're eating and I'm struggling to keep the conversation going, in the window behind me this truck pulls up with 2 dogs in the back. Owner runs off on some errand while the dogs stay put. Mid-bite, these 2 dogs start going at it hard. I mean the one on top has the other bent over the edge of the truck. They are banging like the next stop is the vet. The entire time they are effing. They just stare at me. My date looked at him once or twice, awkward laugh, then tried to resume normal first date banter. I couldn't do it, just paid the tab and bounced. Neither of us messaged afterwards.
Dude, last month I went on a date that ended up back at her place. Things get going in the bedroom, but I suddenly hear the pitter-patter of tiny feet. I look at the doorway to see a duck walk into the room, look me directly in the eyes and quack. She says, "Oh, don't mind him, that's Tupac." I started laughing so hard that I couldn't continue. Never spoke again because I laughed at her duck. Edit, clarification and spelling.
Worst was entirely my fault. I had been in a 4-year relationship but recently dumped. And kicked out. It was only about 3 weeks later and I was still shell-shocked when a buddy set me up with one of his friends. I'd met her a few times previously and agreed. My bud even gave me his hockey game tickets he had bought but wasn't going to be able to go to. It sounded fun to her over the phone and she quickly agreed. Date night came and I was basically a zombie. Just dead walking through the whole night. I couldn't carry a conversation because just about every time I went to say anything, something about my ex would pop into my head, so I just remained silent. At one point she even said something about my mood and I can't remember, but I'm sure it was something encouraging, not insulting at all, about getting over my ex and just trying to have fun. She really was a terrific person. After the game I suggested a jazz bar and like a trooper she readily agreed. Yes, let's jazz up this night, or something like it I think she said. Anyway, great little place with incredible musicians. That I used to take my ex to. Yeah, bad effing idea. I have absolutely no poker face. So while a guy is ripping it on piano, another on sax, my date looks gorgeous and is really enjoying the music. I, on the other hand, look miserable. After a few drinks and few saddened glances my way, she's ready to go. We talked some more in the car and both came to the conclusion I was not ready for dating as I was still broken. 100% correct. Shoulda have been me and some buddies out instead of a date. So, I walk her to her door after all this. And instinctively go in for a kiss after she says, "Good night." Again, still a zombie. Just following the motions. Still my all-time biggest WTF date moment. Right ahead of losing all my date money in a poker game 10 minutes before the date and forgetting my wallet and having to get a loan from the waiter. She gave me a crinkled mouth look and just said, "Oh, dear," and that, thankfully, stopped me in my tracks. Yay. I have no idea what I'm doing, I said, laughing a bit for the first time all night and finishing with, "Good night." She was also kind enough not to bring that night up again as our paths crossed the next few years, only one time mentioning, "You look so much better."
Dang, she's a saint lol.
My wife wanted to plan our 13th wedding anniversary. I was excited because usually I plan it. She bought us some new golf discs and after a quick supper we went to play. We hadn't played in forever. We were laughing and I had a great time. She served me with divorce papers and told me that date was a test to see if she still had feelings for me. I also learned that she was having an affair that started well before our anniversary. Edit. Holy cow everyone. I love you all. Your support in this is amazing. Thank you to everyone with the kind words. Honestly, I've had a rough couple of days, but having hundreds of people show me I'm supported. Thanks Reddit.
Man, that's cold.
Went out with a girl when we were probably 13 or 14. We went to see Inception. She gets up to go to the bathroom, but doesn't come back for a long time. Eventually I go look for her, and the guy behind the concession stand looks at me and gives me the most pitying look I've ever received, and points around the corner, where I found her making out with another guy. I should have walked out, but instead I went back to my seat to watch the rest of the movie. She returned and asked me to fill her in on the last hour of Inception of all the damn movies to miss the middle of. Also, because that wasn't enough, after the movie, I wasn't sure what bus to take home, and she pointed me to the wrong bus. I don't think this was intentional, they were right next to each other, and I wound up in a part of the city I'd never been in before.
Oh, hey, are you okay? You were gone a while. Okay, cool. What? Oh, well, these guys are training that girl to steal people's secret thoughts, and there was about 15 minutes where she just made out with some random dude, but no one mentioned him, so I'm not sure what that bit was about.
When I was in college many years ago, before the advancement of cell phones and social media, I was chatting with a girl I met on a BBS who lived on Long Island, NY. I was 18 at the time, but lied and said I was 22 because she said she was 25. We spent a few weeks emailing each other, as well as calling each other. We even exchanged pics. When we finally met up, things blew up. Turns out we both lied about our ages. She was really 33, and lied because she thought she looked younger. She admitted she sent a college photo to me. We still had dinner together, but it was awkward as hell. We never spoke again.
This reminds me of the Friends episode where Monica lies to a guy saying she's younger and all he told her was that he was a senior, and she assumed a senior in college. Nope.
I got catfished. We talked for hours, and when it came time to pick her up I clearly saw it wasn't the person I thought I was talking to. I just gunned it and sped off.
I just don't get this one. I get catfishes that avoid meeting the person. That makes sense to me. Don't wanna blow your cover. But I don't get the catfish that is willing to meet, like what's the best case scenario they're hoping for here?
Tinder date. She looked nothing like her picture, while not ugly, just completely different. Picked the worst restaurant in town, which I looked past because everyone has different taste. We came back to my house and complained about not showing affection or touching her, so I started touching her and then got mad about wanting a hookup, which I didn't, but the final straw was when she decided she didn't like my house, which I had just bought and was proud of. She immediately wanted to go to Home Depot to buy stuff to start remodeling. It was by far my worst and weirdest date, and I hope she found a house to remodel.
Question mark, question mark, question mark, question mark, question mark. First date and she's trying to remodel your house? Ma'am, you haven't gotten past the first date. What makes you think you can even begin to suggest doing that?
That was my thought exactly. I had just bought it too and was super proud to be living in a place I wasn't renting, and she's like, yep, let's go ahead and take this wall down.
Ordered a pitcher before she got to the bar. She showed up, poured herself a beer, chugged all of it. She must have been 5'3" and like 100 pounds soaking wet. Then unleashed a tirade of problems on me that ended with her telling me she was currently pregnant. By the time her story was done and I found out the bad news, she had already gone through another half a beer. I took her glass, poured it into the pitcher, chugged the whole thing and got the F out of there. It was the first date I had been on since a big breakup, and I didn't go on another date for around 2 years. Sometimes life signs slap you across the face, and I wasn't going to ignore that one. Lol. Edit. This has become by far my top viewed comment, so I'll throw out some more facts. She dropped the pregnancy tidbit during a tirade about her ex. I hate him so much, he's effing my best friend even though he got me pregnant. Me. Wait, so this was like a year ago? A while back? Her. No, it was last month. Me. Sue. Are you pregnant now? And I think y'all know what the answer was. I got a text the next morning from her. Hey, we didn't sleep together last night, did we? Question mark, exclamation mark, exclamation mark, exclamation mark, exclamation mark, exclamation mark. I blocked her on socials after that, and blocked her number. Edit 2. 3.7K and counting. Glad somebody is enjoying my awful date, haha.
Hey, good on you for taking her beer and chugging it. Drinking during pregnancy is no effing joke.
It was one of the worst feelings to have found out about the pregnancy after supplying beer for the date. Just made me feel like garbage. Taking her beer away was for her. Chugging it before I left was for me at that point.
Accidentally texted, on the worst date of my life, to the girl I was on a date with.
It was like the second or third date and I made her dinner in my apartment. After dinner I was doing the dishes and I came back out to the living room and she was cutting up lines of cocaine on my coffee table.
I had a Tinder date ask me if I wanted to get naughty and nod towards my bedroom. I had a roommate at the time. I'm all drunk, stumble in my room and take my shirt off. I turn around and she's chopping lines on my dresser, lightning quick. Obviously I had to zoot the toot, but that was as naughty as we got. She turned out to be an insane benzo addict who tried to move in and bang my roomie. Good times.
I pre-ordered 2 drinks like normal. She shows up, she orders a ton of expensive items and drinks, all the time she is on her phone. I think the bill was around $350, but I already paid my part, so I walked out through the back and ghosted.
My friend did this. His date ordered a lot of expensive drinks and dishes and she didn't even touch any of them, just took photos and posted them on her SockMed. My friend just F'd off and came back to the restaurant a week later and the same waiter told him what happened when he left. Turns out the girls had no money on her and tried to get out of paying by saying she was an influencer and showed her Facebook account. She had like 50 friends and no one reacted to her photos. So she called her parents and were pissed they had to pay like $300. My friend wasn't even mentioned the entire time, so apparently the date forgot about him.
Back when I worked at a deli, I ended up randomly hooking up with a customer. I got her number after we hooked up and I called her to set up an actual date for that weekend. Turns out we were just not compatible in the slightest. We went somewhere to drink where the music was too loud, and I could barely hear what she was saying, so there was a lot of what, and me asking her to repeat herself. That combined with the fact that we really had nothing in common just led to a lot of awkward silences throughout the entire date. Never saw her come in the deli again after that.
He brought his mum. I decided it wasn't going to work out for me, but I stayed, because I couldn't miss it. At least I can remember it as funny in some degree.
Please elaborate, please?
First date, went over to her dorm. We had plans to cook lunch and go for a walk. I show up with sides, she has a package of chicken breast and nothing else. And is in her pajamas. And all of her roommates are there. I roll with it, improvise with that's in the kitchen, not much, broke college kids, and start making a decent chicken Alfredo. 5 minutes in she offers me my choice from mini bottles. I accept because do I need a drink now. 5 minutes later she gets a call. Spends the next half hour on the phone loudly talking with her sister while I cooked. That was, by and far, the worst date I have ever been on.
I smoked a lot of WD at the time and had a date with a girl I met on OkCupid who was 420 friendly. She told me to bring some with me, so we met at a Mexican restaurant at 7:30 and smoked in my car before going in. As soon as we finished the bowl, she was like, "Oh, I forgot. I have work at 8 tonight, bye." So she either went through all that effort to get smoked out one time, or she lemonlawed me but still wanted to bum a smoke session off me. Either way, I was high as F and wasn't going to not get some enchiladas, so I went in and got a table for one.
Love the confidence. F it, I'ma get some food anyways.
Went to the movies with a girl. The movie was so bad, she ate all of the popcorn, she fell asleep for half of the movie, and she was glued to her phone after the movie.
I was 16 and took out the hot girl from school. Had a few classes with her and she seemed pretty normal. I picked her up and she took me to see The Passion of the Christ in theaters and spent the whole drive home talking about Christ dying for our sins as I sat in complete, horrified silence. When I dropped her off she offered me a blowjob. It was the single most confusing night of my young life. Edit, I had no idea she was religious or we were going to see the movie until we got to the theater. Edit 2, I was a 16-year-old boy and she was still the hot girl in school. Of course I took the blowjob. Got set up on a blind date by some friends several years before my wife and I started dating. The date was early September and we met in a restaurant in the city. It was a nice place, the kind where the wait staff wear dress shirts, ties, etc. I was in a nice suit and tie, she showed up in jeans, flip-flops, and a hoodie. I jokingly said something along the lines of, "I'm assuming they didn't tell you this place is sort of snooty." She goes, "They did." I didn't give a F. I ain't shaving my legs and putting on some fancy dress for some guy who I don't even know if I want to even touch his DK, let alone if I'm willing to let him between my legs. I just stared at her in disbelief. She then said, "I mean, you seem nice and all. But I ain't in the mood to do all that work when I can just go home and do it myself." I asked her to keep her voice down and she goes, "Why do you want me to keep my voice down? You afraid people will hear me talking about going home and effing myself with my vibrator instead of letting you come back and F me?" I just stood up, walked over to the waiter, paid for the drink I had while waiting, apologized to them for her outbursts and said blind date. I'm not sticking around, and left. I did hear from our mutual friends that she later got married to some guy, stabbed him on their anniversary a few years later, and is now in jail for attempted murder. They were like, "Yeah, we always knew she was kinda crazy. Ya effing think? And #X200B. Edit first, holy poo, did this take off? My phone's had a effing stroke. Second, some more details. Yes, she stabbed her husband. Stabbed. Not poked. Stabbed. Yes, she was pretty. But not worth that level of crazy. The people who set us up are no longer friends of mine. This situation was part of the falling out as well as they became completely insufferable twits. They didn't know she was that level of crazy. They thought she was just bitchy or pushy at times, and outspoken. The woman in question stabbed her then husband about 20 times with one of those small handheld gardening shovels, trowels, whatever you want to call them. It was their 1-year anniversary. She is still in prison. He eventually got out of the hospital, went through rehab, and moved out of state. Last I had heard he got remarried and had kids.
I feel you. I really do. I was on a lunch date with a recently divorced woman, in a low booth at the restaurant, which was closely packed with tables. She was one of those naturally loud people. She went on a long rant about how she was tired of hopping into bed with every guy she dated. She wasn't doing that anymore. From now on she wasn't ever going to sleep with a guy until they were engaged, etc., etc., etc. More and more people around us started staring. By the time she was done, we were the center of attention there. It was very weird.
When you were leaving, you should have been like, well, looks like I'm popping the question tonight. Fingers crossed, and said that to the people in the restaurant as you were leaving.
Probably not as bad as others, but hey. Agreed to meet a guy from a dating app. He seemed nice enough even though it was a bit tricky to find a time and place to meet. In the end he offered to come to the neighborhood where I work, really nice, and we agreed on a public random spot nearby after my work hours. But then it went downhill. First he was more than 10 minutes late. Fine, he did come my way, I wasn't mad. But then nearly the whole walk while strolling through random streets we were either awkwardly silent, made small talk, or he lectured me how I shouldn't have dropped out of uni 4 years ago. I now have a different job which I love. Lectured me how I should work full time, and it was bad that I didn't. I'm fine as it is, plus I can't do more hours at the moment. Asked me if I was religious, then judged me for not leaving the church formally yet despite not being religious. Tried to tell me my job, which is a bit niche and he knew nothing about, wouldn't belong to the medical field, kinda gatekeeping the medical field when the money I get literally comes from the health insurance of the patients. That was during the 30 minutes the walk lasted, before he suddenly didn't have more time, which I wasn't mad about after having to justify my own life choices endlessly. I told him we didn't have much in common, we never had contact again, and I'm keeping it that way.
I just don't get it. Yeah, I'll see you later. I have to meet a girl and berate all her choices. Who does that?
Oh, my first Tinder date ever. This was years ago, must have been 18. I met this man for a drink and ended up at his place nearby. Asked where the toilet is and he responded with, "Oh, you're not going to use the facilities unless I wash you." Genuinely thought it was a joke and said I won't be needing his company or any sort of assistance when it comes to going to the loo. Came back out and asked for water. He pointed towards a dog bowl on the floor and told me to use it. Asterisk Jesus Christ, what the F man, asterisk must have been close to what I was thinking of right then. No kink shaming here, but perhaps try initiating some sort of conversation about your puppy play fetish prior to trying to force your kinks on your date. Like, wow. Anyway, he obviously wasn't getting any less creepy, but it was getting very late and I was stupidly young and naive, so for some reason I ended up sleeping over and leaving in the morning. He wanted me to put a collar on me for the night, although I'd already declined the bowl and whatever suggestions he was making. Really wish I'd F'd off right then, even if nothing happened in the end. And another guy who wasn't that great of a date either. As soon as we met, the guy insisted on going to the bank to get some cash out because he'd lost his card. It was after 6 p.m. on a Sunday. I said I don't think they'll be open and that I'm pretty darn sure he won't be able to withdraw cash without his card regardless. He insisted, oh well. Surprisingly, the bank was shut. I told him not to worry, I'll get us a drink. Bought maybe 3 or 4 rounds, and as we left he asked me if he could borrow £20 for WD? Hell no, boy. He then got upset I wouldn't take out cash. Can't remember exactly how the convo went, but he basically threw a temper tantrum and I just left.
Matched a girl on Tinder. She was picky on the restaurants we were going to meet. I let her choose it. I had to take an hour subway to Brooklyn. I reached 15 minutes late due to subway stopping too long at stops. She wasn't in the restaurant. When I msged her, she chastised me and started hurling insults that I didn't value her time. Still thinking it's my mistake, I apologized to her and told her to come back. The minute after exchanging pleasantries, she instantly ordered $90–100 worth of food. Student at the time, to keep the cost low, I ordered myself a small salad. Rest of the date was bland, with her giving one-word replies with a frowny face. Lost interest and patience. Bill was $150. I asked her if she could split, even though mine was only $20. She created a scene and insulted me in front of everyone. The kicker was she ate only 50% of food she ordered and tried to get a takeaway. I was the like F*** that and didn't let her. Took the food and had a movie night with 2 of my friends. Edit. My top comment is of my worst date. Great XD.
Oh my, it's my time to shine, ha 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 ha. Here it goes. So I met this guy who worked as a lifeguard at the local rec center I worked out at. He was super cute, and always was very nice to me. We exchanged numbers and started texting some, and soon he asked me out on a date. Keep in mind that we were both like 17 at the time, haha. So the plan for the date was dinner and a movie, pretty standard stuff I suppose. He asked me where I wanted to eat, and said he had bought tickets to see the new Jungle Book reboot movie. The date was set, until he picked me up, and we got in the car. Here is where it gets really fun. We got on the road and pulled into the local Hooters. It was there that he informed me that we were actually going on a double date, and that his best friend and his girlfriend would be there shorty. So not only am I at Hooters, which wasn't the place we had agreed on and is probably the worst restaurant to take a date anyways, we were being joined by 2 other people that I had no clue who they were. Once they arrived, we went inside and got our food. I personally thought the food was poo, and then the entire time we ate, my date and his best friend talked about partying and how drunk they get and how they had f'd all these different girls and ran from cops, etc. etc. I honestly felt bad for his friend's GF. She seemed so quiet and nice and just sat there listening to her BF talk about doing other girls. My date didn't even speak to me, just talked to his friend. Honestly, at this point I wanted to go home, but I was excited to see the movie, so I stuck it out. When we got there, I swear on my life it wasn't even 15 minutes into this freaking children's movie with other families near that my date not so subtly put my hand on his raging boner and started trying to feel me up. Again, in front of his friends, and with other people around. It was so disgusting, oh my goodness, and it pushed me over the edge. I told him not to freaking touch me anymore, and then we sat there in silence. Once the movie ended, we got back in the car and didn't speak the entire drive home. When he pulled into my driveway, he pulled up halfway, I've got a long driveway, and told me that I could go ahead and kiss him there in the car because he wasn't going to walk me to my door. Needless to say, I hopped out, slammed the door and walked in. I never talked to him again, and stopped going to the rec center, haha. I ran into a mutual friend of both of us, who told me that my date was super mopey and sad because our date went so well and I just ghosted him, _Sue_. F you Ben. Edit. Paragraphs for the sticklers.
Greater than, and told me that I could go ahead and kiss him there in the car because he wasn't going to walk me to my door. That says so much. Had a first date where the girl wanted me to go to her family reunion right after. She was really sweet and made me a mixtape. Was caught a little off guard and my face totally showed it. It was just a little fast, you know? Had another first date where a woman was doing her residency and said we needed to get married and have a kid before she became a doctor. Was not ready to go all in with minutes of meeting her. Had a first date where on Valentine's Day she thought I bought her a puppy. She was super disappointed, lol. She then cried about her ex for about 30 minutes, that was awesome. Edit. For woman 2, I had no indication prior to our date. She would propose getting married in 3 months and having a baby shortly after that. No red flags or anything, just like we sync, let's do it kind of thing. For woman 3, again, no red flags, totally cool before. We had a nice dinner and then I was like, I got you something for Valentine's Day. Went to my car and hid something behind my back. She thought it was a puppy, it was flowers. Seemed dead serious, and I was like, what? For context, I lived in DC and it's a weird town sometimes.
I was that bad date. There are so many bad decisions involved, and this is literally that one cringy moment I think about all the time. At the time I was in college and a friend had given me a pot brownie. Apparently having no plans for anything post-meal, I decided to eat half of it before the date. I was a pretty big pothead, so I thought it would be fine. I wake up about 20 minutes before my date is supposed to happen and the room is absolutely spinning. I had fallen asleep with my head down on my desk and the last hour or so just disappeared. I see a text from my buddy that says something like, "I think there is something else in these brownies, WTF." I have never been slapped that hard by WD in my life. Instead of doing the smart thing and reschedule with an excuse, I decide to go on the date. We were meeting at a restaurant right outside of campus and I had maybe a mile or two of a drive, but I got lost and parked further away than if I had just walked from my apartment. I stumbled around campus for a while before somehow making it on time. I was a disaster though. I couldn't figure out how to go to the counter to order food and I kept forgetting everything my date was saying, so I just said, "Yeah," to everything. The worst part is I dropped my sandwich in my lap and it pretty much exploded. Instead of cleaning it up like a normal person, I started picking the individual pieces out of my lap and eating it like a psychopath. I was too embarrassed the next day to talk to her or apologize. It sucks because I really liked her too and I actually think we would have been a good match. Knowing I am more than likely her weird date story makes me cringe every time I think about it. TLDR. Got high off a brownie and ate a sandwich out of my lap. Also, I drove while I was stoned out of my mind and it was a mistake. Please don't do this. I know quite a few WD enthusiasts that think it's fine or fun, but it's not. I could have killed someone in the state I was in. Just don't do it. Get an Uber or just stay home. It was a dumb mistake made while I was young and stupid.
For me, it was a date that never ended up happening lol. I had met a guy on a dating app eons ago. First date was a good one, we went to a hockey game and it was a really fun time. Then later in the week he wanted to see a movie, I was down. We quickly decided on a movie and what time we'd meet up. I arrived a little early and decided to just shop around casually as the theater was in a mall. I also bought some snacks to sneak inside because I am not paying a small fortune for theater snacks lol. As the startup time was creeping closer, I shot some texts to him to see whereabouts he was because he was not there yet. He was 5 minutes late, so I wasn't too concerned just yet. He texted me back saying that he only just woke up and was now busy jacking off, that he'd be there as soon as he was done. I reminded him what time it was. I was a little irritated because 1. I had to drive an hour from outside the city to get there and he knew this, and 2. This was completely different behavior compared to the first date, which had been really pleasant. The movie was set to start in 5 minutes, I had yet to get tickets because he said he would buy them. I am not sure what he was thinking, but when I told him that we were going to miss the showtime, he told me that if he was buying movie tickets for us that he expected at least a BJ afterwards or during the movie. I told him to drop dead and that I was leaving. I went out to my car. Meanwhile he is texting me nonstop about how he didn't mean it. That he just had a dirty sense of humor and that he was on his way. He'd be there in less than 2 minutes. I told him I didn't think it was funny, I thought it was incredibly rude and inappropriate and that I had zero desire to ever see him again. Maybe I was overreacting, but I felt justified in my anger. First edit. Thank you everyone for confirming that this was not an overreaction on my part. I do want to add a bit of context as to why I didn't just peace out when he told me he was jacking off. I was trying to re-enter dating after getting out of a mentally and sexually abusive relationship. My self-esteem and self-worth was not high and I was still of the belief that I needed to try harder to be an acceptable date. Fortunately I am now engaged and the man I have now is God-tier king and has shown me that I am to be valued and treated like a queen. He has helped me with a lot and while I still have issues, he never shies from helping me with my demons. Second edit. Thank you so much for the awards. I appreciate it so much, thank you. Folded hands, light skin tone.
Not an overreaction, you were justified to be angry at his dirty sense of humor. It wasn't, he was fishing for a sexual reward after the date, like you owe him that. Some guys loves doing this poo.
Blind date number 1. She showed up in an outfit that would be sloppy for the gym and her third sentence was, "God, I'm so horny. I haven't F'd in months and I want it so badly." Classy lady, never called her again. Blind date number 2. She couldn't string more than 6 words together. Zero interests, zero small talk skills. Apparently I wasn't hot enough for her anyway. Blind date number 3. She spent half of the time talking about her ex who had dumped her to become a priest. We texted for a while but she decided she wasn't over the soon-to-be reverend. Since then I've decided not to accept offers for blind dates from friends.
I will take door number 1 please.
Go on a dinner date with a guy as a first meet. conversation is good, we go to his place, I make it clear we will not be having sex, he's fine with it, everything seems good. To preface this next part, one, no, I'm an attractive woman but I have some damn crooked teeth. The top ones are fine but the bottom are pretty messed up. It's never caused me an issue in dating and most men say they haven't noticed it. I have pretty big lips anyway so they don't show a lot. Anyway, for some reason this man asks me what my biggest insecurity is. I say my teeth. He asks me to smile. I do. He says, wow, yeah, they're pretty effed up, and that's all. I went home shortly after and never texted him again. Killed my self-esteem for a minute there.
He asked your biggest insecurity? Was that his abusive relationship pregame move?
Met a girl through a dating site and we agreed to meet up for dinner. I learned very quickly that this girl had absolutely no sense of humor whatsoever. I don't even think she cracked a smile the entire night. The date just got more and more painful as the night went on. At one point, we were talking about online dating. She told me about a friend of hers that went out on a first date with a guy online. She said this crazy guy fell absolutely in love with her friend and said he wanted to marry her. So I said, oh, well, I guess I shouldn't have picked up this engagement ring on the way here, then. She just stared at me blankly and said, that's not funny. Yes, it is. F you.
I think it was funny too. I remember when I was dating my wife, she told me on several occasions guys would tell her, I love you, on the first date. They never got a second date. My response was, I don't love you, yet we have been married 31 years. Edit, lol, yes, I said, I love you. If I remember, it was after 3 months of dating. But that was a long time ago.
At the end of the night she stopped the taxi saying this was her place. She then went into the ATM and took out some money. She handed me what she said was her half of dinner and then got back in the taxi and never saw her again. Maybe not the worst date, since she paid me back for dinner, but still weird.
Haha, that's so weird. In a, I'm sorry, but I can't in good conscience let you pay for me after that date, kind of way.
It wasn't even an expensive dinner, she handed me like $25.
Got asked out by a really unattractive woman while I was stationed in Korea with the army. I said yes because it always bums me out when someone turns me down on a date. So I take her to a nice restaurant. We sit down, and the first thing she says, really loudly in this nice restaurant where everyone else is whispering, is, so I used to be a stripper. Yeah, I'd make a ton of money putting my ass in random dudes' faces. It went downhill from there. We did not have a second date.
On the first date I figured out that the girl I was with was super wealthy. At first I was happy because she seemed down to earth and totally okay with meeting in a more divey bar, it was cool. Somehow we started talking about separating artists who act like assholes from their art, i.e. R. Kelly's Ignition is amazing and I'll dance to it, but don't piss on underage girls. We started talking about Chris Brown and his stupid catchy songs, and that I can't listen anymore because of his actions towards Rihanna and Frank Ocean. She looked me dead in the eye and said Chris Brown can do anything he wants. I was seriously taken aback. Next thing you know I'm asking about how beating a woman can be justified, and couldn't believe that she stood on that hill. She told me, Chris Brown is rich, which means he can do anything he wants. Doesn't matter what. I jeetfoed fast.
Thank you for watching. We upload new videos every day, so be sure to come back for more fun. Please consider liking and subscribing if you enjoyed the video.